Welcome to Far East Wargaming, bringing you another Heresy Thursday. I'm Richard, your host, and once again joining me is Jason.
Hello everyone, glad to be back.
So, this week we're doing another Legion review, and we're taking a look at the 17th Legion, the Word Bearers, the ones who started this all.
Yeah, this is everybody's favorite or not favorite bad boys, depending if you subscribe to #FErebus. But yeah, they're the ones that kicked everything off, and they're very, very evil, as we will see in just a moment.
Yeah, they are the first to turn traitor and the one to convince everybody. And if you've read all the books, you'll have followed along on how exactly that happened. But for the Legion itself, we're going to start where we start with all of our legions, and that is with the Legion special rule. And for the Word Bearers, that is called True Believers. A model with this special rule may never have its leadership characteristic modified below a value of 6. Furthermore, if one or more models with this special rule are part of a combat that results in a draw, then a side that includes one or more models at the end of the fight subphase with this special rule is counted as having won the combat by 1 point. If both sides include models with this special rule, the combat remains a draw. This is actually a very strong trait.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that your leadership can never drop below 6 gives you kind of a pseudo stubborn, if you will, right? Because most of your basic infantry squads are going to be leadership 7, leadership 8 with a veteran sergeant. But if you're never modified below 6, that's pretty strong. You're absolutely right. Winning all drawn combats automatically is also pretty strong, because drawn combats do happen more often than you would think. Yeah, it's nice. It's kind of like a nice little always there passive ability. And unlike some of the other Legion traits, everybody benefits. It doesn't matter what kind of model it is, if it's HQ, if it's tacticals, if it's elite choices, whatever. I mean, you essentially get this bonus, and that makes it pretty good. And again, even if you're losing combats and doing different things like this, or night fighting plus fear or whatever else, you just can't be modified below 6. Now, leadership 6 is obviously not, fail proof. You're still going to fail. But I do like this one, and it is pretty easy to remember as well, which is a bonus for old people like me.
Yep, pretty straightforward there. And it synergizes really well with some of their other rules, because they can gain fear quite easily in this. So drawing a combat and then forcing your opponent to take a leadership check at -1, then with fear included, is basically a -2.
Yep, absolutely. But again, yeah, this is pretty good.
Moving on, we'll look at the Word Bearer's advance reaction. And this one is called Glorious Martyrdom. This advanced reaction may be made once per battle during the opponent player's shooting phase, when an enemy unit declares a shooting attack targeting a friendly unit under the reactive player's control with the Legion Astartes Word Bearer's special rule. Once this reaction has been declared, a single model in the reacting unit with the Legion Astartes Word Bearer's special rule is selected by the reacting unit's controlling player. That model is removed as a casualty immediately, without any 2-hit or 2-wound rolls being made by the attacking unit, and with no armor saves or damage mitigation rolls being made by the reactive player. This ends the shooting attack, with no further rolls or tests being made. If any of the weapons in the attacking unit would normally inflict further hits after causing an unsaved wound, such as with the Deflagrate special rule, or other effects due to inflicting hits or unsaved wounds, such as weapons with the Blind or Concussive X special rules, then these additional hits or effects are ignored and have no effect. Any attacks made with weapons with the Ordnance or the Destroyer types, or the Blast or Template special rules, ignore the effect of this reaction and are resolved as normal. This here is pretty strong in my opinion.
Yeah, it's strong in a lot of different ways, but before I talk about that part, what I will say is the way it's written opens up a lot of shenanigans, because you'll notice that it specifically says unit under reactive player's control with the Legion Astartes Word Bearer special rule. It doesn't say anything about infantry. Doesn't say anything about tanks. It doesn't say anything about walkers. It simply says something that has that Legion Astartes word bearer's special rule, which means theoretically, yes, you could sacrifice, like in a squadron or something like this, a vehicle to save the other vehicles, which could be powerful if you're, for example, getting shot at by a 10 las cannon heavy support squad. Yeah, I mean, it basically, if you use it right, you can tease out an opponent's critical shooting at just the right moment and save your target squad and make them waste it, because that unit can not switch over to a different target or can't do something like this. So it does reward a bit of planning. So it is a little bit more complex in that regard. The one thing that I do also want to point out, because I've seen this actually misplayed, it specifically says that if it has the blaster template special rule, they ignore the effect of the reaction. So I've actually seen somebody try to play this on a squad that got hit by a Plasma Deredeo in a big 5-inch template, because they were trying to save their guys from that pretty massive, potentially, breaching hit. Yeah, I like this one. I think it's really, really good. It's not as straightforward or easy to use as perhaps some of the other advanced Legion reactions, but if you're smart again and you kind of tease it out at the right time, it can potentially swing a game in your favor.
Honestly, luckily this is an advanced reaction and used only once per game, because I think out of all of them, especially when we're talking about shooting reactions and the ability to mitigate what's happening or that shooting attack, there's very few legions which have something that's effective. I think we have a few legions that can move out of line of sight. We have some legions that can fire back at full ballistic skill or double the rate of fire, these type of things. But in terms of immediately negating a potentially murderous volley of fire, and we are really talking about the AP2 weapons like las cannons, which are prevalent nowadays in the games we play, it's keeping you alive for another turn and letting you get shots off again.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it's just there's just so many examples of how this thing can really ruin somebody's day. I already mentioned the 10 las cannon squad basically being wasted. How about the 50-shot full-kite culverin squad being wasted? That normally just makes you pick up and it just deletes entire units. Let's say you have a predator squadron with 3 predators and they get shot at by something and you really want those predators to be able to shoot again or in your turn or something like this. Theoretically, you could sacrifice one of the predators to save the other 2. So again, this has a lot of usage in a lot of different ways. I like the fact that it not only protects your units, but it really wastes, again, potentially one of the opponent's most powerful shooting attacks.
So moving on, we'll look at the Word Bearer's Warlord traits. And they have 3 Warlord traits. One is traitor only. The other 2 are neutral. There is no loyalist one, surprisingly enough. And the first one, being the traitor only trait, is enslaved by darkness. This warlord trait may only be selected by a model with the traitor allegiance and corrupted unit subtype. A warlord with this trait modifies his strength and toughness by a value determined by the current game turn. +1 on game turns 1, 2, and 3. No modifiers on turns 4 and 5, and -1 on game turn 6. When targeted by any weapon or special rule that targets the demon unit type, this warlord is counted as though it had that unit type. In addition, an army whose warlord has this trait may make an additional reaction in the opposing player's movement phase, as long as he's still on the board. I think this is deceptively strong because there is really no downside to it other than having to be corrupted, because the games we play nowadays don't get to a 6th turn or even a 5th turn.
Yeah, that's a topic for another day about why yet another example of why I hate 4-turn games. But yeah, this is very powerful, right? Because that +1 strength and toughness, the +1 toughness for the first 3 turns of the game means most things can't instant kill you. Power fists, thunder hammers, a Dreadnought Claw, although it is brutal 3, yes, you do have to take 3 saves, but it can't just double you out. Like, it really makes your HQ choice very durable. I like that a lot. Again, you don't get the modifier turn 4, turn 5, but if it's a 4-turn game, it's not a big deal. Or turn 5, -1 on turn 6, but again, there's just not that many missions unless you're playing standard missions or something of your own devising that goes to a turn 6. So I totally agree with you. It's pretty good. Yeah, I like it. The
I,
only downside I could possibly see, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say the only downside is it's a movement phase reaction. Most people like to take Warlord traits to give them a shooting phase reaction. And movement phase is probably the middle of the pack in terms of value. But this is a good Warlord trait.
Yep. I think this is trying to imitate the rules that we have for demons, where their strength values change as the time goes on. To a lesser extent in this case, because I think in the demon rules it is a bit more severe than we're seeing here. And you're right, movement phase reactions are suboptimal. Nice to have an additional interceptor, but all in all, you do want a shooting phase reaction. So up next, we have the second Warlord trait, and that's Unswavering Devotion. Any unit that includes at least one model with the Legion Astartes Wordbearer special rule, and have at least one model within 6 inches of the Warlord with this trait, including the Warlord himself and the unit he has joined, automatically pass the first fail morale or pinning test they are called to make each turn. In addition, an army whose Warlord has this trait may make an additional shooting phase reaction here. Automatically passing morale checks, automatically passing pinning checks. Again, another very strong Warlord trait.
Yeah, it is. I think what doesn't make it over the top is because it only has a 6-inch bubble, and it's a 6-inch bubble from the Warlord, not from his unit. So in most cases, you're probably only getting the Warlord unit and one more in range, possibly 2 more. But being able to auto pass the morale check, even though your Legion trait means you can never go below 6, the auto passing ability is quite nice, and especially for the anti-pinning capabilities, because let's face it, we are in a meta that's rife with Nemesis bolters and other things that cause pinning checks. So being able to bypass that is actually pretty good. I'd probably rate it not as good as Enslaved by Darkness, but it's certainly not a weak Warlord trait. Again, being able to get a guaranteed ignoring those special rules every single turn is pretty strong.
Yep. You have to bear in mind, it's game turn, so it can be used up before you get your turn in as a pinning check, for instance, or as a check for morale from shooting. But if you're the one getting the first turn, it could potentially be a automatic pass on a combat you've engaged in here, which is actually, I find, very strong. You can put a sacrificial unit as a definitive roadblock if the Warlord is just nearby, that allows you to come in next turn and try and do some work.
Yeah, it's true. It does require a little bit of finesse, but again, that 6-inch bubble is going to require some pretty smart placement if you really want to maximize the usage of it.
The final Warlord trait is called Iconoclast. A Warlord with this trait and any unit he has joined gains a bonus of +1 attack when locked in combat with an enemy that includes at least one model with the independent character special rule, a Legion Vexilla, or a Legion Standard. When making a shooting attack or a melee attack targeting fortifications, buildings, or other terrain pieces with a toughness characteristic, they gain a bonus of +2 to their strength or the strength of any weapons used. In addition, they get an additional reaction in the assault phase. This one here, out of the 3, I think is probably the weakest. I think it is nice to get another +1 attack, and most of the time we do have Legion Vexillas in most units, let alone independent characters in some. But the secondary benefit, I just don't think has a part to play in most games.
No, not at all, because if your Warlord and whatever unit he's with is spending their time beating up on fortifications or buildings, then they're probably not being used properly. So it won't come up every single game or even every 4 or 5 games, in my opinion. You're absolutely right. It is pretty powerful to get +1 attack for he and his unit. If you've already got kind of a Death Star that you're building with your close combat HQ, that extra attack is always going to be very useful, especially if it's like a Terminator command squad with Thunderhammers. That's another 5 to 6 attacks that's coming with those Thunderhammers. So not bad. Yeah, not bad. I actually will disagree a little bit, because for that reason, I actually rated a little bit higher than Unswerving Devotion, because it just pumps up the offensive output of a specific unit, whereas the other one requires a lot of finesse to take advantage of that bubble.
That's fair. I just find personally the unit you put your Warlord with tends to have enough attacks themselves to take care of most of the things charging. And if you're a Word Bearer's unit, you're putting them with a pretty tanky close combat unit as well. There, yeah, I can see the argument there. I still think I like the ability to affect more units, and I kind of rate that higher. Even though you are 100% correct, it is a finesse thing, and you will have to get your Warlord in the right position. But positioning in in the latest edition is less important, so you can lead him out front and put him close to other units if you're building a wall walking forward. So that's all for the Warlord traits. Moving on, let's take a look at the rights of war. And the Word Bearers have 2 rights of war. The first rite of war is called the Dark Brethren. It's a bit of a long one. At the start of the battle, after both sides have deployed their entire army, excepting only those units deploying by means of the Infiltrate special rule, but before the start of the first turn, one unit in the enemy army that has been deployed on the battlefield must be selected as the sacrifice by the player of the detachment using this rite of war. If no enemies are deployed on the battlefield at this point, the controlling player selects an enemy from the reserves or otherwise off the battlefield as the sacrifice. If all models in the sacrifice unit, including any models that are assigned or have joined the unit, are destroyed or otherwise removed as casualties, then the controlling player for this detachment gains 1 favor of the Dark Gods, and another sacrifice unit is selected from among those enemy units deployed on the battlefield at the end of the turn by the player using this rite of war. If no enemy units are deployed on the battlefield at that point, then again the player selects a unit that is in reserve. The controlling player of the detachment using this rite of war must assign each point of favor of the Dark Gods to one of the units under their control as soon as it is earned. For each point of the favor of the Dark Gods assigned to a unit, its strength, movement, and weapon skill are increased by 1. A unit may have no more than 3 points of favor of the Dark Gods assigned to it. So a unit with 2 points of favor of the Dark Gods would increase their strength, movement, and weapon skill by +2. As for limitations, any one unit with the detachment using this rite of war must inflict at least 1 unsaved wound or hull point of damage on the sacrifice unit each turn, or one of the units in the detachment using this rite of war selected at random suffers perils of the warp. Also, an army that includes this detachment using this rite of war must have the traitor allegiance. A bit of a long-winded one there, but potentially very powerful if you can get the conditions to go off, and that is killing the sacrifice unit and hopefully killing them early.
Yeah, so there's a way to use this. I think the limitations are really not limitations, because you're going to select something that you can hurt every single turn. If you don't, then again, you're not doing this right. And theoretically, you're going to select stuff that you can easily kill. So, for example, a single rhino, a understrength unit that's down to those last 3 or 4 models. Pick something that you have a reliable chance of actually destroying, and then all of a sudden your favored unit is bumped up tremendously. You can see a Word Bearer's unit getting up to weapon skill 6, weapon skill 7, weapon skill 8, movement 10. Like, it's pretty bonkers actually how much that this can buff an actual unit, but you do have to be smart. Now, the one thing is if your opponent is smart, he's going to not give you easy things to pick on if you're using this rite of war. But hey, you can't protect absolutely everything. But yeah, it's pretty nasty. I've actually seen a couple battle reports where the favored unit was up to +2, and I think I've seen one battle report where it was up to +3 by the end of the game, and that's just brutal. I mean, absolutely brutal when you've got a unit of basic schmoes that are rocking stats like that. I like it. It's pretty fluffy, and the limitations are pretty much non-existent. It is locked to traitor only, as is both of the rights of war for the Word Bearers. But what I find very interesting is the 1.0 Word Bearers had to be traitor. And 2.0, there's nothing that says they must be traitors. So theoretically, you can run Loyalist Word Bearers, but you're going to be locked out of the majority of their special units and characters, because those have the traitor subtype, and their rights of war have the traitor subtype as well.
Yep, you're right. You can run loyalist word bearers. I think you run maybe one model, right? Because I think that was all that was left of the word bearers that low loyalist. They were culled very early on. But yeah, it's very powerful. I think also you can spread the love around, potentially over, especially over longer turn games, not the 4-turn games so much, where you can kill off those smaller 5-man units or that tactical squad hit by something like Volkite Culverins. But it does mean that you generally aren't targeting heavily the tankier units. So because you don't want that unit to survive or survive for a long time there. I like it, but I think that it's less favored by most word bearer players because the second Rite of War is just so much more characterful, especially in the groups we play with here, and that is the last of the Serrated Sun. The effects of this Rite of War are Galv Volback squads may be taken as troop choices in the detachment. All Galv Volback squads in the detachment using this Rite of War may select Legion Dreadclaw drop pods as dedicated transports, and any unit composed entirely of models with infantry unit type with access to a Legion Rhino transport as dedicated transport may select a Legion drop pod instead. As for limitations, a detachment using this Rite of War may not include any units with a movement characteristics of 0 unless that model is also an orbital assault vehicle special rule, or any units with the artillery unit subtype. An army whose primary detachment is using this Rite of War may not take an allied detachment. This Rite of War may not be used by allied detachments. And finally, an army that includes this detachment using this Rite of War must have the traitor allegiance. Gal Vorbak, the ones everybody loves to play and hates to play against here, as troop choices. Very, very popular, I find.
Yes, it is. Now they have toned down Galvor back a little bit from 1.0, which we'll talk about when we get to that unit description. But you're right. It does make your Galvor back troops, but it does not give them lines, so don't forget that. It does give them access to the Dread Claws, and Galvorback do not have a dedicated transport option in their unit rules. You usually have to purchase something separately, like a Land Raider or a Spartan. Getting access to drop pods with a lot of other unit types that could take rhinos, I mean, that can be powerful. But you really got to kind of build that type of list with drop pods, in my opinion. You're either going all in or you're not, right? But most people will still take this Rite of War just to get Galvor back as troops. And the reason why they do that is that the Word Bearers have a lot of units in the elite slot, as we'll talk about in just a moment. And all legions have a lot of juicy options in the elite slot. So by freeing that up, by moving the Galvor back to troops, you give yourself more flexibility in elite. And that's pretty much the main reason why a lot of people take this. I don't view any of the limitations again as limitations. You can't take anything with movement 0. That's not really a big deal. You can't take artillery. That's not a big deal. You can't use it. You can't have an allied detachment, and you can't take it as an allied detachment. And you have to be traitors. So again, the limitations for this Rite of War, or either of the Rites of War for the Word Bearers, are pretty much non-existent.
Yep, you're right. This is a tailored army. You're building a whole force around this, and you have to, I think, take advantage of at least one Dreadclaw, if not more, and bring in drop pods en masse to really make sure they're delivered on time. It's another version of drop pod assault there. But again, you don't have to take the drop pods for your troop units. It just says you are eligible to. So you can just drop your Galvor back in, or just one of these Dreadclaws. Running Galvor back up the field is a bad idea. They are very tanky, but there's a lot of shooting in this edition, and they, well, like Terminators, they'll die to weight of numbers there. So that is it for all of the Rites of War. Now we'll move on to the Word Bearer's Armoury. And there's quite a bit of juicy stuff here, and it's also relatively expensive. The first part is Burning Lore, and it's any Legion Praetor, Legion Cataphracti Praetor, or Tartarus Praetor with the Legion Astartes Word Bearer special rule may select the Burning Lore upgrade for 25 points. A model with the Burning Lore upgrade gains the Corrupted and Psyker unit subtypes as well as the Diabolism Discipline. This is how you get your Warlord to be able to use that Warlord trait, the Enslaved by Darkness Warlord trait, because it gives him the Corrupted subtype, and giving your model psychic powers for 25 points. Very wordberry, but reminiscent to the Thousand Suns we saw in our previous Legion review.
Yeah, there is some downsides to the Corrupted subtype, and I'm going to talk about it just real quickly because it's relevant to this particular part of the Armoury. Models with Corrupted gain fear. 1 hits on a model with a Corrupted unit subtype by a weapon with Force or Psychic focus special rule gain instant death, so be careful. You don't want to run your Praetor with this into somebody with a Force sword, for example. Unit entirely with Corrupted subtype is immune to the effects of fear, which is good. Automatically passes regroup tests, cannot choose to fail morale check due to our weapons are useless. And if the unit's composed entirely of models with a Corrupted unit subtype fails a morale check, you actually don't fall back at all. You just suffer D3 automatic wounds without saves or damage mitigation rolls of any kind allowed. And the last thing is, no model that does not have the Corrupted unit or the Demon unit subtype can join a unit that includes one or more models with the Corrupted unit subtype. So you do want to take this if you're planning on sticking your character or independent character with a unit of Galbor back, for example, because it's pretty much the only way that you can join them. Getting access to Diabolist, getting access to Corrupted, it's all good and all, but again, it does limit what units you can attach them to, and it does kind of limit some of your flexibility. And as is the case with many of the choices in the Armoury, as well as the Wordbearer special units, they are on the pricey side for points. So if you're not careful, you could have a very small, very elite force that is significantly outnumbered, depending on what you're up against.
You're right, but on the bright side, the Wordbearers also have Dark Channeling, which helps get the Corrupted subtype to any infantry or dreadnought unit type with the Legion Astartes special rule. Again, this is 25 points, but it's for the whole unit. So if you're taking this Burning Lore for your Praetor, and you want to put them with a standard command squad in Terminator Armor, for instance, you have to take this 25-point upgrade for that command squad to be able to do so. It's a way around it, but then you're talking about 50 points for on top of your HQ cost there. So it does add up really quickly.
Yep, absolutely. It's interesting that you can give it to a Dreadnought unit type. Leave something in the comments if you can actually think of a way to actually make this useful. But Amar Gaul already has Corrupted, so why would you want one of your other Dreadnoughts to be Corrupted? Again, I'm not quite sure of seeing the combos that are available here. I don't know, a Praevian upgraded, and then you give the Dreadnought he's with Corrupted, I guess. I don't know. That's a little bit of a weird one to me, but yeah, the points do stack up really, really quickly.
I think if anything, you're doing it for that fear special rule if you're looking for it, because it gives you the fear one. And for Corrupted, though there are downsides, I don't think there's too many, because in all honesty, force weapons or psychic focus weapons are few and far between. So unless you know you're going to go up against the Word Bearers in a battle, for instance, if it's just a friendly game, then you can tailor things by taking, for instance, a Librarian or such. But the only force, I think, which have easy access to force weapons are the Thousand Suns. So yes, they would be the anathema to this force. But then again, it's very situational.
Yeah, agreed. What is a little bit more spicy, however, in my opinion, is the tainted weapons. So these have changed slightly from 1.0. Basically, it says any model with the character subtype and Legion that starts as Wordbearer special rule may exchange a power weapon for a tainted blade, tainted axe, or tainted maul for 10 points. And then also in the listing, they have these things called tainted claw, tainted talons, which will actually refer to special weapons carried by certain units of the Wordbearer. So let's talk about the tainted blade. It's essentially the same thing as a power sword. But what that 10 points does is it gives you Murderous Strike 6-up on top of the Rending 6-up. The Tainted Axe, pretty much exactly the same as a Power Axe, once again with Murderous Strike 6-up, and the Tainted Maul with Murderous Strike 6-ups as well. So that's what you're paying the points for, is to give your models a higher chance of just one-shotting an opponent, a multi-wound opponent. The only downside, again, is anything that triggers on a 6 is not always that easy to trigger unless you've just got the quantity of dice to get more reliable access to rolling that 6. So your basic character with one of these is probably only going to, every couple combats, going to trigger the murderous strike. So it's not a bad thing per se, and it's only 10 points. So if you've got 10 points to spare and you want to throw it on, one of your squad sergeants or whatever else, go for it. It might be a bit useful.
Personally, if we're talking about the Tainted Blade or the Tainted Maul, I'm still taking a Power Fist, especially over the Tainted Maul there. The +2 strength and AP3 versus ×2 strength and AP2, even though it is unwieldy, is favorable there. It inherently, for most of the characters, will have a Murderous Strike because of the Strength 8 versus Toughness 4 there. I see where they're coming from this. I just don't think Murder Strike is worth 10 points, especially on unit characters who majority of the time are going up against 1 wound character models who are really just looking for that rending to win the combat and not really needing the Murder Strike.
All fair, totally fair points. When a Power Fist is 15 and one of these is 10, I totally agree with you that the Power Fist is probably the better choice. It is fluffy and thematic, which is always a plus in my book, and it's kind of cool to see a few of these modeled or sprinkled through your army.
Yeah. The Tainted Claw and the Tainted Talons are, well, the Tainted Claw is strength 9, but I think that's coming on special units there, so the Dreadnought and the Tainted Talons are basically just normal claws with Murderous Strike. More interesting, well, with a slight twist, is the Warp Fire weapons, and these are upgrades to the plasma pistols for any model with the Legion Astartes Word Bearers special rule there. And for 5 points, you can replace your plasma pistol, your plasma gun, or plasma blaster with the Warp Fire variant. And what this gives you is an additional pinning special rule to these 3 there. So I like pinning. I really think it has a place, especially with the lower leaderships we're getting now, especially with the word bearers who are causing fear to things. It has come in. I've seen it when I've played against yourself or against other people there, that at key situations, especially in a charge or when you're being charged, the pinning rule there really can throw a spanner in a carefully laid plan.
Yeah, I got a couple other angles on this. So you are giving up a strength point because most plasma weapons are strength 7. You are giving a strength point to go down to strength 6. But against other infantry, it's pretty much, it's no downside. It's only really a downside against things if you're shooting out, dreadnoughts or other walkers or vehicles. And I agree with you totally that access to more pinning is actually really good. What I want to call attention to as well is it turns your plasma guns into warp fire blasters, which are assault to, not rapid fire, which means you're pumping out more shots at 24 inches and you have the ability to shoot these things and charge. So now all of a sudden your plasma support squads can actually become a viable offensive threat, or if you're mixing this into other units that may not normally be able to charge due to you shooting rapid fire plasma guns, that's pretty good. Being able to do that, and again, pumping out more shots at 24 inches means that it has overall more offensive output than a plasma gun, even though the strength is only 6.
All very good points there. It's the assault aspect there, I think, also does play a huge part. You're right. I keep forgetting that plasma weapons are rapid fire because I'm not generally trying to charge my plasma squads into things because they have a lot more hitting power from the shooting attack there. But it does have its place if you can find, I think, especially in the veteran squads, being able to shoot that plasma and then charge might be very beneficial there. They've also got something called bolt spitters, and this is just a variation on a bolt weapon there. The bolt spitter is 24 inches, strength 4, AP5 rapid fire. The greater bolt spitter is 48 inches, strength 5, AP4, heavy 6, twin linked there. I think these are also very specific to the units that use them.
Yeah, it's specific to kind of like the Tainted Talons. The bolt spitter, the base bolt spitter, is actually linked into a Galv Warback. So it basically gives all of them a shooting attack It's nothing to write home around about. It's just basically a bolt gun. The greater bolt spitter is a bit spicy because that is heavy 6 twin linked. Now, I guess if that's a direct replacement for a heavy bolter or something, I guess that makes it better. But let me think of what would be taking in the advanced bolt spitter. Is it only the Mara Gal?
I think it is.
Yeah, it's pretty much only the Mara Gal. So forget everything I just said. You're not taking this on your Mara Gal in replacement of one of the other better weapons.
Yeah, it's the Tainted Claw comes with a bolt spitter there, but you have I think it's a warp fire cannon that is a lot better than this. So yes, very nice lore-wise, thematic-wise. Again, I just don't think you'll see it on the battlefield there.
No, but just real quickly, because we kind of glossed over it on the painted weapon, the painted talons are the Gal Warback. And what it basically does is it's rending 6 up and murderous strength 6. And when the Gal Warback have a mountain of attacks, as we'll talk about in just a moment, you're going to be triggering murder strike a lot, which is what makes Gal Warback so deadly to everything, including dreadnoughts.
So the word bearers also have a console here. They're one of the few ones that have a console, and it's called the Diabolist. So it's an upgrade for the Legion Centurion, Centurion Cataphracti armor, or the Centurion in Tartarus armor, and it's 25 points. It's very similar to everything else we've seen with the upgrades there. It gives them the Corrupted and Psyker unit subtypes, and also gains the Diabolism discipline. Also, he may exchange a power weapon for a force weapon at no additional cost there. It's really what you do if you want to have an independent character with a Corrupted and Psyker subtype. So a non-Praetor, the non-Praetor version of Burning Lore.
Yeah, the psychic discipline itself is actually not very bad at all, because the power, dark and terrible power, as it's called, when a charge is declared for a model with this power or unit that includes a unit with this model with this power, controlling player can make a psychic check for the model before dice are rolled for the charge distance. If the psychic check is successful, then the model with the power gains Hammer of Wrath 3, which is meh, but increases their strength and toughness characteristics by +1 for the duration of that assault phase. So that does make them a bit harder to kill. So that's not a terrible power, actually. So I can see some use out of that. The psychic weapon version of this is called Hellfire, and it's a template, so a flamer template, but it is strength 7, stronger than a heavy flamer, AP 4, with assault 1, rending 6 up, and deflagrate, and psychic focus. And basically what psychic focus says is if you want to use it, then you have to do the psychic check. If it's passed, then you shoot as normal. If it's not, then you suffer perils of the warp. The Hellfire is actually pretty decent, because that strength 7 plus rending means you do have a pretty good chance to wound a lot of stuff and potentially kill some of it outright and then deflagrate on top of it. So not bad. I mean, not bad for a little 25-point upgrade on it. So yeah, I can see some use for this.
Yep, you've got to bear in mind that the psychic power as well, on the downside, if you fail, you still gain the +1 strength and toughness. And in addition, it's to the end of the controlling player, the start of the controlling player's next turn, as opposed to just that assault phase. So though you do take some penalties for the perils of the warp, you are still getting your strength and toughness characteristics, actually for even longer if you failed it. So if you're in a unit with a lot of models and ablative wounds there, it might be more beneficial to fail the perils of the warp check.
Absolutely.
So that is the end of the Armoury and the consoles. And as with all of the Legion reviews for the Legions we look at, we always start with the Primarch when looking at the characters. And their Primarch is arguably probably one of the weakest if I think about it there. But it's Lorgar for 415 points. Master of the Wordbearers, Aurelian the Golden, the Voice of Truth. His profile is a movement of 8, weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, wounds, initiative of 6, 5 attacks, a leadership 10, and a 2+ save there. In terms of war gear, he has the Armor of the Word, the Illuminarium, Devotion, and some frag grenades. Special rules wise, he is of course a word bearer, master of the Legion, it will not die 4+, the Crusader special rule, the Fortress of the Word, the Power of the Word. He is a traitor, and his Warlord trait is Sire of the Word Bearers. He may be upgraded to Lorgar Transfigured for 25 points. In terms of his Warlord trait, the Sire of the Wordbearers, all units composed entirely of models with the Legion Astartes Wordbearers special rule, which can draw line of sight to Lorgar, add +1 to their charge distance rolls made for them, and may use Lorgar's leadership in all leadership tests, morale checks, and pinning tests made for them. In addition, the army gets an additional reaction in the assault phase.
Yeah, he's not your beat stick Primarch. He's very much your force multiplier Primarch. Now, of course, he's not going to be a slouch in close combat against regular Legion units, command squads, etc. But against another Primarch, he's probably going to get smacked around because he's not the most powerful. And with weapon skill 6, he's not on the high end of weapon skills either. But actually, this reflects his place in the lore, so I have actually no issue with this. Being able to add +1 to all charge distance, if you can draw a line of sight, pretty powerful. Using his leadership for morale, pinning, etc., also pretty powerful. And if you look at his other rules, many of them are force multipliers as well. So Fortress of the Word, he automatically comes with Thaumaturgy and Divination from the core psychic disciplines. If you upgrade him to do Transfigured, then he gains instead Corrupted, subtype, Thaumaturgy, Divination. He replaces with Anathemata and Diabolism. And you can add demons as non-compulsory troop choices or non-compulsory slots. It's not true. Any non-compulsory slots in the Force Org chart with units from Ruinstorm Demon Army list. So that's pretty flavorful if you want a way to get demons easily into your army. If you look at his other special rule, Power of the Word, any Legion Command Squad, Cataphracti Command Squad, Tartarus Command Squad selected as a retinue with Lorgar gain Fearless and Feel No Pain 4-up. So a better Feel No Pain, which is pretty nice. And in addition, once per battle, any one friendly unit composed entirely of models of infantry or cavalry that can draw a line of sight or with at least one model within 18 inches of Lorgar, but not Lorgar's unit themselves, can be selected, gain Fearless and Feel No Pain 4-up for the duration of that turn as well. So again, those are great force multiplier rules. As far as the armor, it's pretty standard for Primarchs with 2-up armor with a 4-up invuln. It increases to a 3-up against a weapon that has force or psychic focus rules and wounds inflicted by perils of the war. Has a pretty decent shooting attack. His gun is called Devotion, range 12, strength 8, AP2 pistol, concussive 2, graviton plus, pulse, haywire, mastercrafted. So the combination of high AP2 plus graviton and haywire allows it to actually be very versatile in what you shoot this thing with. And then Illuminarum, which is his close combat weapon. It's a big maul scepter thingy, +2 to his strength, so that's going to be a strength 8 attack from Lorgar, AP2, and it is melee mastercrafted armor bane and brutal 2, so that's actually pretty powerful against certain things such as vehicles or brutal 2 against just about anything. Yeah, I rate him probably, in my opinion, middle of the pack as far as Primarchs go, and low end if he's going against other Primarchs. But he's still a Primarch, and he's a pretty good force multiplier for the Wordbearers based on his rules.
Yeah, I'm underwhelmed by him. Again, I think it's normal because in the lore he is probably the most underwhelming of the Primarchs. His close combat ability is subpar. I think there are just normal characters in some legions that would treat him like a beat stick. That are available here. And his force multiplier aspect, having to have line of sight for his Warlord trait, means that you kind of have to keep him central or elevated to really take advantage of that. And if you are doing something like that, you are subjecting him to some potential fire. And I think we've talked about this in the past, but the Primarchs themselves are very vulnerable to weight of fire and shooting attacks, even though they have a plethora of rules. The will not die 4+, the 2+ save. His toughness isn't very high at strength 6 there. So for some of the higher strength weapons, you're still looking at 2s, 3s, and 4s to wound, bypassing the AP there. Yeah, I think hard to play if I was playing Lorgar.
Well, I'll give you a couple examples of things I like, right? So he's one of those Primarchs that you're absolutely going to take a retinue with. Now, remember, if you take a retinue with a Primarch, it does count against your 25% of the army points value, so you do have to be careful about that. But the reason why you're pretty much going to always take a retinue is because of the fact that it gives them Fearless and a 4-up Feel No Pain native. That's a pretty big boost. Also, don't forget anything with movement 8 or, it has a +1 to charge distance, right? So Gal Vorbak got movement 8. With his Warlord trait, they're getting +2 to their charge because +1 for being movement 8, +1 due to the Warlord trait. Contemptors, same thing. Marigal, same thing. So now all of a sudden, a lot of your assaulty stuff gets even better with Lorgar around. I do like him. I'm not probably as down as much. I do agree with you. He's not at the highest end of Primarchs. Completely agree with that. But yeah, I can see a total use for him, but I also think that he does, again, kind of force you into certain builds if you're going to use him. Builds that are heavy on assaulty elements, builds that are heavy on things like Gal Vorbak. And you're probably going to be outnumbered in most cases because most of the stuff on the Word Bearers list is pricey to begin with. And then you're throwing this Primarch and his retinue down as well. So
I'd be more keen for the Lorgar Transfigured as well. The access to the demons there makes it very fluffy and adds, I don't know, I just like the aspect of being able to get demons into the Force. I've played with the Demon Army a couple times. Very fun to play with there. Adds a different, I don't know, different aspect to the battlefield, but I'd still take any of the other Primarchs or some of the independent characters over Lorgar.
I can see that. So definitely not disagreeing with you there. I guess probably the last thing I'll say, because I think Demons of the Ruined Storm, it's its own subject that we can talk about for a very long time. I'm actually not as big on the Demons of the Ruined Storm as they're currently written, because I think Sovereigns are amazing. But most of the other demons are kind of meh, not good, not bad, in my opinion. So until those rules get a rewrite, with fingers crossed, they probably hopefully get a rules rewrite sometime in the near future and not the far future. I'm just not a big fan of them for anything else other than fluff.
Yep, I think we might need to spend an actual day talking about that one there, because there are different things I like and dislike as well there. But we're talking about the Word Bearers today. So, moving on from the Primarch, we're looking at the elites. And we've talked about them already, but the first elite choice is the Gal Vorbak squad for 275 points. Now, it's 5 Dark Brethren with characteristic profile of Movement 8, Weapon Skill 5, Ballistic Skill of 4, Strength and Toughness of 5, 3 wounds, Initiative 5, 3 attacks base, Leadership of 9, and a 3+ save. Their war gear is a Bolt Spitter, Tainted Talons, Frag Grenades, Crack Grenades, and Power Armor. In terms of special rules, first off, they are corrupted. They have the Legion Astartes Word Bearers special rule. They're Relentless, Chosen Warriors, Rage 2, Feel No Pain 5+, Bulky 2, and Traitor. You can upgrade the unit to have 5 additional Dark Brethren for 55 points per model, and for every 5 models in the unit, one may exchange their Bolt Spitter for a Flamer, a Melter Gun, a Warp Fire Blaster, or Tainted Talons. The Tainted Talons are actually free. And for every 5 models in the unit, one model may exchange their Tainted Talons for one of the following weapons, and that is a Power Weapon or a Power Fist. Very, very strong unit. A very popular unit. Very powerful unit for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah, they did get toned down, so I'll talk about that first, because if I remember all my rules correctly in 1.0, and if I don't, say something in the comments, but if I remember correctly in 1.0, they had the equivalent of a squad sergeant that you could give Artificer to put in that kind of tanking ability. They don't have that anymore. Everybody's a 3-up save, so you can't tank. That's been taken away. The Power Fist, it's now 1 per every 5 models instead of on that character, so that's a bit of a change as well. So that squad sergeant used to be able to take this. They're 3 wound models and they're T5 and they're weapon skill 5. So those are the things that make them absolutely fantastic, but they're not as durable as they used to be, because if I remember correctly in 1.0, they also used to have access to a native invulnerable save, which they don't have anymore. So instead of having a demon invuln save, they now have a feel no pain 5-up, which is still going to serve almost the same purpose because of the toughness 5. They're going to be able to still get it. They're not going to get doubled out in most cases. Yeah, they're very good. They're just not quite as tanky as they used to be. They are a little bit more versatile. I can definitely see use for the Melt-A-Gun. I can definitely see use for the Warpfire Blaster. I can see use for the Power Fist because at strength 5, you're now at strength 10. That's just stupid good. Yeah, really, really nice unit. And that's the whole reason why you see so many of them, not just because it's fluffy and it's very word bearers, but just because it's also very punchy and can go kick a hole in almost anybody's tail.
Yes, but very pricey, especially if you're running them as a 10-man squad. And if you're crazy enough to do that, and you're taking the Rite of War where they are troops, so you're likely running more than one of these units, there's a lot of points sunk into 10 to 20 models there. Then if you take into account, you're also probably going to take a Warlord with a retinue, your number of units or number of models on the battlefield is dwindling very fast.
Yeah, personally, I'd rather take these as multiple small units or MSUs rather than one big blob, because I think one big blob is just a magnet for fire support, and by the time you sink a character and everything else into it, you're absolutely right. It's so expensive. And I would rather just have a couple 5-man squads that force the enemy to kind of deal with both of them, right? But yeah, I like this unit a lot. The models are great. I've seen plenty of people using 40k possessed and converting them up to make them look like Gal Vorbak. So that's a budget way to go about getting these models. Nice unit and totally word bearers.
The next elite choice is the Ashen Circle Squad for 125 points. This is 5 models, 4 incendiaries, and 1 iconoclast. In terms of profile, they are movement 7, weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, and toughness of 4, 1 wound each, initiative 4, 2 and 3 attacks respectively, leaderships of 8 and 9 respectively, and a 3+ save. Their war gear is an Akkadic hand flamer, an axe rake, frag and crack grenades, melter bombs, power armor, and Legion Warhawk jump packs. They are a heavy unit, and they come with the Stubborn, Crusader, Bitter Duty, and Scorched Earth special rules. You can upgrade the squad to include an additional 5 incendiaries for 20 points per model. The Iconoclast, which is the Sergeant, can exchange his hand flamer for an Inferno pistol for 15 points or a Plasma pistol for 10. He may also take Phosphex Bomb for 15 points, and of course can upgrade to Artificer Armor for 10 points there. In terms of the special rule, Scorched Earth is when a model with this special rule inflicts a hit due to Hammer of Wrath X special rule. It inflicts an additional hit, so a model with the Hammer of Wrath 1 would inflict 2 hits, and all hits inflicted due to the Hammer of Wrath X special rule gain +1 strength. This is cumulative with any other attack modifiers that may be apparent, and they count as flame attacks for those special rules. I think counting as flame attacks is a double-sided part there as well. In terms of their armory, the Inferno pistol is the standard pistol, range 6, strength 8, AP 1, pistol 1, armor bane, and melter. The Akkadic hand flamer is a template weapon with strength 4 and AP of 4, assault 1, torrent 6, and pinning. And the axe rake is a strength +1, AP 3 melee shred weapon there. I like these weapons. I think that the hand flamer is actually pretty powerful, even though it's only strength 4 because of the torrent rule.
Yes, well, I mean, it's better than a standard hand flamer because it's AP 4. The torrent is going to allow you to basically shoot things further away, because normally flamers, you're limited by the distance of the template itself, whereas the torrent, whatever number is in the brackets, essentially adds on extra range that you can move that template to try and hit more models. And then it has pinning, so that's pretty good as well. Yet another source of pinning. The axe rakes being strength 5, AP 3, but also having shred You do have a decent number of attacks on the charge with these guys, plus the special, Hammer of Wrath effect of their special rules. I like them a lot as well. I think what lets them down a bit is they're only 1 wound models. A lot of other Legion elites can be 2 wounds. They're only weapon skill 4. Again, a lot of other Legion elites are weapon skill 5. You don't send these guys in against other Legion elites or even Terminators or anything like that. You send these guys in basically to go murder regular dudes. That's what they're pretty good at. They're not good at taking on the other hard hitters in the enemy's unit, but they're definitely better than they were in 1.0. The models are very cool, and it's nice to see them more on the table more often in 2.0 than you used to see in the past, which was almost never.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Warhawk jump packs in this latest edition. The versatility you get from the movement there really does play a part. It is a small unit, but it's not too pricey to make them a 10-man squad. It's only 100 points extra to make them a 10-man squad. And so for 225 or 235 with Artificer armor there, it's a relatively cheap elite slot choice, especially for the word bearers, where everything is pretty expensive. Though you are right, the biggest downside is the weapon skill of 4, because weapon skill is so huge and the disparity in weapon skill is so huge in 2.0.
Yeah, and the hand flamer is also strength 4 versus 1 being strength 3, a normal flame pistol. So yeah, I mean, again, they do have more offensive output than, say, a Legion assault squad, but they're not going to have more offensive output than most other Legions heavy hitters. And I guess also because they're in the elites and you want to be taking things like Gal Vorback, you want to be taking things like Apothecaries, you want to be taking things like a Marigal. There's just so many other things that you want to take in the elites choice. That's the other thing that just kind of lets them down. Do you really give up on those other things to take these? I'm not sure that you do, but again, they're not like never takes as they were in 1.0.
Yeah, I think the fact that they come with a jump pack as well, for some of the Rite of Wars, if you're trying to get all those drop pods in, it's another deep striking unit for relatively cheap. But yes, not the best unit, not the worst one I have seen there. Fluffy wise, I like them. Modeling wise, I like them as well. So yes, play them for non-optimal lists, and you don't always have to play the best unit.
No, absolutely. Totally agree with that.
The last elite in the Liber Hereticus is the Dreadnought, the Marigal Dreadnought. And this one, as a base price, is 240 points. In terms of the profile, it differs from the normal Dreadnought. It's movement 8, weapon skill of 6, ballistic skill of 3, strength and toughness of 7, and 8 wounds with I5, 3 attacks, leadership of 10, not that it really matters, and a 2+ save. It is corrupted. Its war gear is the Warp Fire Cannon as standard, Tainted Claw with an inbuilt Bolt Spitter, and for special rules, it is a word bearer. It has the It Will Not Die 5-up, Rampage 2 special rule, Shroud of Dark Fire, Accursed, Pathfinder, Move Through Cover, and Traitor. You can upgrade the Warp Fire Cannon for a greater Bolt Spitter, a Gravis Melter Cannon, a Gravis Auto Cannon, or you can have it dual wielding Warp Fire Cannons there, Gravis Las Cannon, or again you can have it dual wielding Tainted Claws. I don't know why you would bother with changing the Warp Fire Cannon weapon. Maybe running 2 Tainted Claws there.
Yeah, I agree with you. Before we get into the special rules, just kind of talking about the loadout on this. Because he's only ballistic skill 3, you're kind of wasting the Gravis Las Cannon, in my opinion. You're going to miss half the time with this thing. So I think in most cases, you're better off staying with the Warp Fire Cannon, where the ballistic skill isn't as big of a deal. It just affects how much you potentially deviate. I could definitely see a spot for the Tainted Claw, running the dual claws. That way, this guy is just getting a lot of attacks between the combination of charging, rampage, and dual claws. Pretty nice. 8 wounds, which is amazing. That's 2 more than a standard Contemptor. It will not die. He's very tanky. You have a chance of getting wounds back. If we talk about his special rules, these have been changed a bit from 1.0, but they're still pretty good. So Shroud of Dark Fire Any hit allocated with this model with this special rule from plasma, flamers, meltas, volkites, weapons has its strength reduced by -1, which is nice. In addition, 5-up invuln should it suffer an unsaved wound with instant death. In addition, any model with this special rule gains a 5 of invuln save, and should it suffer an unsaved wound with the instant death special rule, it is not immediately removed as a casualty, but instead loses D3 wounds. Instead, for one of each unsaved wounds with the instant death special rule inflicted on it, if a model with this rule loses its last wound or whole point, but before it is removed as a casualty, all models, both friendly and enemy, within D6 plus 6 suffer an automatic strength 8 hit, so the explosion is actually bigger. And then finally, the accursed rule basically says any models with the demon or the psyker or corrupted subtype must reduce toughness or strength by -1 when they are within 6 inches of a model with this special rule. Models that also have the special rule immune to its effects. So what that basically means is don't stick your Margal next to any of your psychers, diabolists, demons, etc., because you don't want it actually degrading your guys. You do have rules like Pathfinder and Move Through Cover, which help your mobility. You don't have that stupid rule in 1.0 where this guy could basically walk through buildings, or in Zone Mortalis, ignore the walls and do all kinds of shenanigans there. He's still really, really good, and he's kind of mid-priced between a Contemptor and a Leviathan, sitting at 240 points. But there's definitely a use for him, and things that he gets into combat with, he's going to outlast them. Other Contemptors, he's going to outlast them. Pretty good. Pretty good, but not an auto take like he was in 1.0 with that stupid wall walking rule that he had.
Yeah, the higher weapon skill really puts it up there for me. I would really not bother with the shooting attacks here. The Shroud of Darkfire is basically the same as the automatic shield for a normal Dreadnought, but with the added bonus of the reduction in strength to incoming fire from most of the things you'll be shooting at him there, and also a greater explosion range. We love explosions at Far East Wargaming. Explosions most of the time are what kill more units in close combat than the actual close combat. If you watched our battle reports in the past, you'll see that is very much the case for the majority of our battle reports with Contemptors involved.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And probably just my last comment on the weapon out below it out again. Again, I'm a fan of just leaving them as is, or the dual claws. The Gravis Melta cannon is a maybe because it's twin linked. So I can see a place for that. That kind of offsets the weapon skill, believe skill 3 a little bit. But yeah, just keep him cheap as is, and I think he'll still do plenty of work.
So that is it for the elites. Now we'll move on to the HQs. And the first HQ is Zardu Layak for 300 points. The Crimson Apostle, the Thrice-Born, the Binder of Souls, the Voice of the Unspeaking. And he's a unique HQ because he doesn't come alone. He comes with 2 Anakatis Cullblade Slaves. The profile for Zarduk is movement 7, weapon skill of 5, ballistic skill 5, strength, toughness, and wounds of 4, I5, 4 attacks, and a leadership of 10 with a 2+ save. His blade slaves follow a similar profile with movement 7, weapon skills of 5, ballistic skills only 4, strengths of 6, toughness of 5, 3 wounds, I5 with 3 attacks and a leadership of 8 and a 3+ save. For Zarduk, he comes with a bolt pistol, the Azurda Charis, the Artificer Armor, an Iron Halo, the Panoply of Flames, frag and crack grenades. The Blade Slaves come with plasma pistols, an Atticus Blade, power armor, frag, and crack grenades. This entire unit is corrupted, and Zarduk is a Psyker. In terms of Zarduk's special rules, he has Master of the Legion, Independent Character, Relentless, Fearless, a Hatred of Loyalists, Binder of Souls, the Traitor special rule, and his Warlord trait is the Eater of Wisdom. The Blade Slaves are Legion Astartes Wordbearers with the Rage 2, Bulky 2, and a 5+ Feel No Pain. They are also Chosen Warriors and Relentless there. In terms of the Warlord trait for Zardu, it's the Eater of Wisdom. If Zardu Layak is the army's warlord, then the controlling player may choose up to 3 friendly units composed entirely of models with the corrupted unit subtype from the same army as Zarduk at the beginning of the battle before any models are deployed. All models in each of the selected units gain the bonus of +1 strength and movement characteristic, but must take a leadership test at the end of each of the controlling player's turns. If that test is failed, the unit suffers perils of the warp, while if it is not failed, there is no effect that turn. In addition, any army with Zarduk as its warlord may take an additional reaction in the assault phase there. This is a potentially very powerful warlord trait.
Absolutely. And before we get into all of his war gear, weapons, and special rules and everything, I mean, let's just talk about this warlord trait. How about strength 6 on your Galvorback? Those are corrupted. How about strength 5 on a corrupted assault squad? There's just so many different little combinations that you can use this on by granting the corrupted to a particular infantry unit, or picking things like the Galvorback just to make them even more deadly. Again, taking a leadership test and potentially suffering perils of the warp, depending on what unit you want, that could either be bad or could be not that big of a deal. I like it. He is pricey, however, at 300 points, but you get a lot for that 300 points. I mean, he's got 4 wounds, and you don't see 4 wounds on power armored or artificer armored character models. You see it on Terminators because of the bonus wound that they get for the Terminator armor. He has 4 attack base. That's pretty good. And then he's got, a melee weapon and a bolt pistol giving him 5. His slaves are strength 6, toughness 5, 3 wounds. Everybody's initiative 5. Everybody has weapon skill 5. Yeah, I mean, he's pretty good, right? Like, the only thing that in my mind lets him down before, again, we get into the war gear and everything else is the fact that it is 300 points. That is a lot. Pump into your HQ and what is already an army that is points hungry because of all the rules and all the special units and everything. But you get a lot for that 300 points. I will have to admit that. And him and his little Blade Slave unit is no slouch in hand-to-hand combat.
Well, the way I look at it is if you're looking at a normal Praetor all kitted out, especially with all the special rules that he has, but then you're putting a command squad. And the command squad, you're generally putting them in Cataphracti armor, so you are getting a 2+ save. But they are vulnerable to all that instant death. Their Blade Slaves are 3 wound models, so the equivalent wound-wise of a 3-man command squad, but with toughness of 5. So those wounds go a lot further. Yes, you are testing on 3s, but they come with an inherent feel no pain there. And I think it's that inherent feel no pain that will really see them through. So you're talking about a 3+, 5+ save against nearly everything.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, yes, you do get a lot for that 300 points, and you're right, it is kind of a budget command squad with the durability, with the multiple wounds and the feel no pain and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, again, it's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad by any stretch of the imagination. And I think, his warrior and other special rules are actually pretty decent as well. So his own weapon, the Azurta Charis, if I'm pronouncing that right, it's strength user, but it's AP2. It's melee, and it's unwieldy, and it's force. So that's a pretty decent weapon. Yes, you're striking last with it, but it's AP2 native. The Blade Slaves with their Anakatis Blades, those are the strength of the user, which in this case is strength 6, but they're already a native AP3. They have Murderous Strike 5 up and Brutal 2, so they can pump out a lot of Brutal 2 attacks, and many of those are going to hit Murderous Strike. His special rule about the Panoply of Flame, it says all models of the Legion are started as Word Bearer. Special rule within 12 inches of the Panoply of Flame gain +1 modifier to their score when determining victory in assaults and +1 to their sweeping advance rolls. So that does also lend yourself to more aggressive assaulty type army lists. And then for Binder of Souls, he gains the Psychic Discipline Soul Binding. And what that says is the psychic power itself, Soul Binding. When an enemy unit declares it will make a reaction to Zardu-Leak or any unity is joined, the controlling player may choose to have Zardu-Leak immediately suffer perils of the warp. You resolve the wounds before any part of the reaction is resolved. If he's not removed as a casualty, then the reaction is canceled. That could be pretty good, because 1/3 of the time you're only giving up 1 wound to essentially turn off a reaction. The reactive player does not expend a point of their reaction allotment, and if the reaction can only be used a limited number of times, it is not considered to have been used in this instance. And the unit declared the reaction gains no benefit and takes no action. So basically, it can switch a reaction off but not completely burn it up. And then telepathic change is the psychic weapon, and it says it's a range of 36. It's only strength 2, but it's assault 4. It pins. It has shell shock 3, which is crazy. If you do actually manage to get a pinning hit through, that's going to be testing at a huge modifier, and more than likely you're going to pin the enemy. And then psychic focus, it's basically the rule that says you have to take a psychic check to use this. I like him. I think he's flavorful. I think the models are beautiful. In the past, people would buy this unit just to use the Blade Slaves as additional Gal Vorback. But I do agree with you that you get a lot for that 300 points, and he's definitely usable now.
I really like the Blade Slave's blade there. The Murderous Strike 5+, even though you are strength 6, so you're not going to be looking for 5s to wound there, but the fact that on a 5, those are 2 saves you have to make. Yes, probably 3+ or 2+, sorry, probably 2+ saves if you're going against a multi-wound model. But if he fails any of them with that Brutal 2, he is dead. So, yes, it's not instant death because doubling out in strength. But still, I think it's a very fun weapon, and I'd honestly love one of the units I'd love to play.
Totally agree, and great models, as I said.
So the second HQ for the Word Bearers is Argyll Tal for 240 points. The Crimson Lord, the commander of the Serrated Sun there. So his profile is a movement of 8, weapon skill of 6. Ballistics, strength, toughness, wounds, and initiative all of 5, with 4 attacks base, a leadership of 10, and a 2+ save. His wargear is 2 demonic talons, umbral pinions, artificer armor, frag and crack grenades. He is a character, unique, and corrupted subtype. He has Master of the Legion, independent character, relentless, bulky 3, so he's a big boy, feel no pain of 5+, rage 2, traitor, and his warlord trait is the Crimson Lord. And the Crimson Lord is, if Argyll Tal is the army's warlord, then both Argyll Tal and any Gal Vorback unit that he joins gains a 5+ invulnerable save and the Lion unit subtype. In addition, you get an additional reaction in the assault phase there. Giving Lion to Gal Vorback is, I think, the main reason you take Argyll Tal.
Oh, it's so tasty. I'm sorry. It's just so tasty. As if Gal Vorback weren't tanky enough. You're now giving them a 5-up invuln, and you're giving them mine. So these guys become the ultimate objective grabbers that you can't really do anything about. So I really, really like that a lot. He's got some pretty good stats. He's got a lot of attacks and a lot of potential damage that he can do. I mean, his demonic talons, they're strength users for strength 5, but they're native AP 3. They have Murderous Strike 5-up and Rending 5-up, and he has 2 of them, and he has base 4 attacks. So he has 5 attacks, 6 if he charges, potentially other effects based on his other special rules, such as Rage, and then granting that line to Gal Vorback is just so powerful. The Umbral Pinions, so his wings, they have a lot of rules, but honestly, you're probably not going to be using them very often because you want him with that unit of Gal Vorback, as we just described, right? But if you do decide to use the pinions, it says at the start of the controlling player's movement phase, you can make his value 14 for the duration of the turn. It allows him to move up to 14, regardless of the movement characteristic on his profile, and he gains any other benefits of a movement of 14, such as obviously a longer or a faster, longer ability to charge, excuse me, is what I'm trying to say. In addition, when moving in this fashion, he ignores terrain for both moving and charging, but he has to take dangerous terrain checks as normal when beginning or ending his movement in dangerous terrain. On turns when this option is used, he can move over both friendly or enemy models without penalty, but he has to end his movement at least 1 into his model from another enemy unit. So yes, you can kind of send him like a heat seeker missile to go attack and kill something. He's going to be able to move really, really far. And then finally, the last part of this says that he can still run while using this special rule. So hello, movement 19. Moving up to 19 inches, ignoring terrain models from other units, but if he runs, he cannot make shooting attacks and he cannot declare a charge. So I guess if you wanted him to get somewhere really quick and giving up the charge, you could during a reaction made in any phase, a player can choose not to use this special rule to gain any bonus to their movement characteristic if you wanted to do that. The pinions are great and all, but again, I would much rather stick him with the unit of Gal Vorback and make him even more tanky and give line. It's just so good. It's really, really good.
Yeah, the pinions are basically a stronger jump pack because it really is all the same rules with a bit more of a movement distance there. So very situational. I think you're using that at the end of the game if you're not on an objective and you need to get something really far away. You're jumping him 14 inches. Basically, it's a guaranteed charge in the last turn if you wanted to just get him out there. So yeah, I can see a use for it, but in terms of actual usage for the majority of turns, it's sticking him with the Gal fallback and making them tanky. But then again, a reoccurring theme with the word bearers here is the price. 240 points for Argal Tal, 275 points for the base Gal Vorback. That there is 500 plus points for a command squad really, in taking up 2 slots, the HQ and the elite slot, the elusive elite slot there. Or it could be a troop slot if you are taking the Serrated Suns.
Yep, absolutely, all fair points. But again, I mean, most people that are taking a traitor in a command squad are probably buying a Land Raider form because being on foot is a bad idea, as we know. So it's going to be similar points in that regard, and similar amount of tankiness and wounds.
Well, I'd also argue you'd probably have to take some sort of Land Raider for this as well, because you don't want your Gal Vorback running the field. So you're adding that Land Raider cost or Spartan cost on top of this. So I can easily see this coming up to near 1,000 points. Oh, sorry, high 600-700 points there for this unit. Very fun to see. Well, very fun to see.
Yeah, well, you can't even take a Land Raider because Argal Tal is bulky 3. And a 5-man Gal Vorback squad, which is the minimum size, is bulky 2. So together, that's 13 models worth of transport capacity, which means a Land Raider cannot fit them.
Oh God, so it has to be a Spartan.
It has to be a Spartan.
That's yeah. So those points are adding up really fast, as we've said in the past there. So yes, do it. Guys, take advantage of this, but accept that you are going to be spending a lot of points to get him on the board. So, moving on to the next HQ, and we're still not done with the HQs for the word bearers, but this is probably one of the more famous ones, probably the most famous one, especially if you followed the Siege of Terror books or any of the Horus Heresy books, and that is High Chaplain Erebus for 165 points. The Dark Apostle, Emissary of the Warmaster, Child of the Primordial Truth. In terms of profile, he's a movement of 7, weapon skill, ballistic skills of 5, strength and toughness of 4, 3 wounds, I5, 4 attacks, leadership of 10, and a 2+ save. His war gear is a plasma pistol, a Crux Malefica, a Artificer armor, Iron Halo, frag, and crack grenades. He is corrupted. He is a Psyker and a unique character there. He has Master of the Legion, Independent Character, Relentless, a Hatred of Loyalists, the Fearless Rule, Harbinger of Chaos. He is Traitor only, and his Warlord trait is Shadow Behind the Throne. So what this says is when High Chaplain Erebus is the army's Warlord and is part of a unit composed entirely of models with any version of the Legion Astartes X special rule, no wounds may be allocated to him regardless of the attacking model's rules or effects, as long as there is another model in the unit. If High Chaplain Erebus is engaged in the challenge, then this rule does not apply. However, if High Chaplain Erebus' controlling player chooses to refuse a challenge for a unit that includes High Chaplain Erebus, then the opposing player loses the option to stop one model from participating in the combat. In addition, you get an additional reaction in any one of the opposing player's phases chosen by the controlling player at the start of the battle, as long as he is not removed as a casualty. Some force multiplying rules there, I think, in a sense, but his character profile isn't very different from a normal character there.
Yeah, I agree to a point. I don't think his Warlord trait is honestly that great. It's flavorful, but I don't think it's that great. I mean, yes, you can't allocate wounds to him, which makes him a bit more survivable, but meh. I mean, it's not that great, which is why a lot of people take Erebus and they don't select him as the Warlord. You do get a lot for 165 points. So versus a regular Praetor, you're getting Hatred, you're getting Fearless, you're getting a weapon that is built in Strength +3, AP2, unwieldy, and the Crux Malefica. So he's not a bad hand-to-hand guy because he has 4 attacks base. This isn't two-handed weapon, and he has a plasma pistol, so he's getting 5 attacks, 6 on the charge at weapon skill 5, so he can beat some people up. You can also use him for Harbinger of Chaos. If it includes Erebus, you can select up to 3 non-compulsory elites or HQ choices from the Ruinstorm Demon Army list. Those are still paid and occupy slots on the Force organization charts, but they have to be in reserve and they can only enter play by the Breach the Veil psychic power. So if you really think about it, compared to a regular Praetor for only around 25-ish points, you're getting Hatred, Fearless, Psychic ability, and access to demons, and a native AP2 weapon. That's a lot for those points. You could make a case that he's probably undercosted. Again, the Warlord trait, in my opinion, is garbage. It's not that great, but I see plenty of Wordbearer armies that take this dude as their second HQ and take a Praetor or something else to access a better Warlord trait.
Yeah, you do get to choose when you get your reaction. Again, you're probably going to choose the shooting phase reaction. We're big fans of the shooting phase reaction here. And I think really comes down to, especially if you're using his special rule for Harbinger of Chaos. He is 165 points, but you're suddenly adding many more points. Access to many more points. So I think it'd be interesting to bring a Demon Sovereign in HQ with High Chaplain Erebus. And I have to double check what the rules are for the Breach of the Veil psychic power, but I believe it's something along the lines of they spawn close to where the caster is there. So yeah, I know. I like it. I love him from the books. I love him from the lore. So I'm a big fan of the model, or say like the character for this. But I can understand where the not engaging in a challenge is part of it. If you are taking him with his own HQ command squad there, you kind of do want to accept challenges most of the time. But I can also see when you're going against something like Sigismund, suddenly you don't have to take Sigismund in the challenge.
Yeah, and I'm maybe being a little harsh on the Warlord trait. I mean, the fact that he can't be selected if there's other models from a shooting attack, for example, means he can't be sniped. So I guess that's good, but again, I'm just still not big on him as my Warlord. But I am, to your point, big on him, including him in an army. I am, so I want to be clear about that. I just think that you have other options that are better for Warlords.
Finally, we're getting on to the last character in the HQ slot for the Wordbearers, and this is Cor Pharaon for 125 points. The first captain of the Wordbearers, the Master of Faith, Priest King of Clonchus. And his profile is a movement of 6, weapon skill of 5, ballistic skills of 4, strength and toughness of 3, 4 wounds, initiative of 3, 3 attacks, a leadership of 10, and a 2+ save. His wargear is the Patriarch's Claws, a Digiflamer, and the Terminus Consolaris. He is a heavy character with the corrupted and unique subtypes. He's a Master of the Legion, independent character, relentless, bulky 2, has a 5+, feel no pain, has a 5+, it will not die. The Jealous Command special rule. He is a traitor, and his Warlord trait is the Dark Oratory. And the Dark Oratory reads, if chosen as the army's Warlord, Cor Pharaon automatically has the Dark Oratory as his Warlord trait and may not select any other. When Cor Pharaon is the Warlord of the army, then the controlling player can choose one of the following 2 options at the beginning of each of their own turn. Cruel Invective. All enemy units with at least one model within 12 inches of Cor at the start of Cor's controlling player's turn before any models are moved must make an immediate pinning check and become pinned if they fail this test. The second one is Threatening Entreaties. Core and the unit he has joined gain the Fearless special rule until the start of the controlling player's next turn, but all models other than Core in this unit reduce their weapon skill and ballistic skill by -1 until the start of the controlling player's next turn, and in addition you get an additional Assault Faith reaction. Good and bad in Dark Oratory there.
Yeah, but this guy synergizes well with Gal Vorbak, right? He has the corrupted subtype, which means he can join Gal Vorbak. And corrupted models have the Fear 1. So if you actually look at Cruel Invective, forcing a pinning check on every enemy unit within 12 inches every single turn, and if you're close enough to trigger the Fear as well, you can potentially be pinning a lot of stuff every single turn with this guy, which is pretty cool. I like that. And again, if you're sticking him with things like Gal Vorbak, plus all of his special rules like Feeling of Pain 5-up, It Will Not Die 5-up. Yes, he's only toughness 3, but he does have a 2-up save, and his Terminaris Consularis gives him a 3-up invuln in the shooting phase and 5-up in the movement and assault phases. So it's a pretty tanky little combination in this package, and it only costs 125 points. The strength 3 and the toughness 3 does let him down a little bit, but you don't really want this guy as your beat stick anyhow. You want him with other stuff that's a beat stick. Jealous Command, this basically says if you Corfran or Lorgar is not chosen as the Warlord, then his leadership is reduced by -1 and he gains hatred to everything, which is just another bonus. So you don't have to take him as the Warlord if you don't want to, but if he's in the same unit with Lorgar, or excuse me, same army as Lorgar, not unit, both models gain +1 weapon skill and the hatred to everything special rules while part of the same unit. That's interesting, bumping up weapon skill a bit more. His Digiflamer is nothing to write home about. It's basically just a strength 4 flamer pistol. Patriarch's Claws, decent. They're strength user, however, which is only strength 3, but they're AP2 and they have shred. You do gain a bonus attack, so he has attacks 4, basically 5 on the charge. He's not bad. I like that little pinning effect. There's just so many things in the Wordbearer's army. If you look at the Warpfire, what is it called? Excuse me. Let me get the title right. The Warpfire Blaster, Corfaron. You've just got so many different ways to pin things. I think that he has a use, especially at only 125 points.
You're right. If you stick him with the Gal Vorbak, he has a use there because his lack of combat ability is more than made up for by their proficiency in close combat there. And the fact that you could be pinning things means you're less likely to get reactions against your relatively vulnerable Gal Vorbak. But it encourages you to put him up the field because you have to be within 12 inches. And if it doesn't go off, if he's not with a tanky unit and you've put him with a more standard unit, he's likely to get charged and die relatively easily there. I think the strength and toughness of 3, the toughness of 3 means that strength 6 weapons are instant deathing him there, so his 4 wounds would be negated very easily.
Yeah, I think the only downside of the Gal Vorbak, now that I kind of look at his rules a little bit more, is he's only movement 6, so he actually slows him down. And that could be bad, obviously, so that may be a situation where you wouldn't want to stick him with Gal Vorbak. Maybe you stick him with regular dudes in that particular case. But again, I mean, I like the fact that he can trigger so much pinning, and I like the fact that he has access to fear, which makes those pinning checks more likely to go off. And again, since you can buy Corrupted for pretty much any infantry unit, you could give him a retinue, or you can do all different kinds of things to kind of stick him around. I like him. He's not bad.
Yep, that brings up the point I wanted to make, that all of these HQs are corrupted. So if you're putting them within any unit that's not inherently corrupted as part of this force, you have to pay that 25-point tax to make that unit corrupted so they're eligible to join them. Again, like we said multiple times, the Wordbearers are just a very expensive army to play points-wise that creeps up on you when you start adding in the special characters, which you do want to add. So that's everything in the Liber Hereticus. The Wordbearers do have one exemplary battle unit, and that is the Wordbearers Procurators for 125 points, and this is a 5-man squad with 4 Procurants and 1 Procurator. In terms of their profiles, they are movement 7, weapon skills of 4, ballistic skill strength and toughness of 4, only 1 wound, I4, both have 2 attacks, leaderships of 7 and 8 respectively, and saves of 3+ and 2+ respectively there. The Procurants have a bolt pistol, chainsword, frag, and crack grenades, as well as power armor. The Procurator has a bolt pistol, a chainsword, a frag grenade, a crack grenade, Narthecium artificer armor. They are chosen warriors. They have the Grim Purpose special rule, flesh harvesters, and are traitors. They may take a rhino if they are less than 10 models there and not given jump packs. You can have an additional 10 procurants for 15 points a model, so 150 points for 10 there. You can give the entire squad jump packs for 10 points per model. The Procurator can be upgraded to a heavy chainsword or a power weapon, and for every 5 models you can upgrade 1 chainsword for a power fist or a hand flamer for their bolt pistol or a plasma pistol for their bolt pistol. And the Procurator squad that includes 10 models may upgrade a Procurant to an additional Procurator for 40 points, and a Procurator squad that includes 15 models may upgrade 2 Procurants to Procurators for 40 points each there. That's a strange little rule.
I actually like this unit, right? Because the Procurator is basically the equivalent of an apothecary. And normally you have to pay to upgrade to Artificer armor at 10 points on an apothecary, which is already a 45-point model. So you're getting a discount automatically because he has a 2-up save built in. And then the Procurants that come with him are despoilers, basically. They come with chainswords, bolt pistols, but they have base 2 attacks, whereas despoilers only have base 1. And then the fact that you could potentially add another 2 of the Procurators, giving you 3 Artificer armored, native Artificer armor, mind you, models in the same unit that can also have power weapons, mean this unit actually has more offensive firepower than you think in terms of close combat. And where that actually comes in handy is their special rule Grim Purpose. Any models with this special rule cannot be joined by a model that doesn't also have it, such as Tech Marines and Legion Apothecaries, which may not be assigned to the unit with this special rule. So that says basically you can't stick characters with this unit because they don't have the Grim Purpose rule. But the Flesh Harvesters is pretty cool because friendly models with Psychic Disciplines, Harbingers of Chaos, Diabolism, Anathema within 6 inches can roll an additional d6 and discard the highest result when making psychic checks. So that means your psychic abilities go off more reliably. But the juicy part is, in a mission that uses victory points, the controlling player gains an additional +1 victory point for every enemy unit that is removed as a casualty as a result of a sweeping advance. So, since your basic dudes have more attacks, and you can take up to 15 of them, and you can upgrade up to 3 total into Procurators and give them power weapons, and you can potentially even give every 5 models a power fist, you can make a pretty nice little assaulty unit here that is pretty much going to sweep. And every time it does, it's going to give you bonus VPs. And that's not something that's incredibly common across the Horus Heresy. Of course, there's different rights of war and different things that allow you to do this. But this unit being able to potentially give you 1 or 2 victory points a game, it's not bad. It does have the offensive output to do it. Again, it's an elite's choice, which is kind of the conundrum of the word bearers. There's just so many choices in the elites. Do you take this over other things such as Gal Vorback? Honestly, I'd probably have to think about it because 15 of these dudes totally tooled up is similar cost to like 6 or 7 Gal Vorback. And these guys can generate extra VP. So yeah, I'd have to think about it.
Yeah, you're looking close. If you tool them up and give them all Warhawk jump packs, you're looking just shy of, I think, 500 points there. So it gets on the pricey side. Shy of 400. No, shy of 500 points there. 120 plus 150. Then adding a another, oh god, 150. Wow, you're getting up there in points. Plus 80 points for the procurators. Add the power swords you want to give them there. Yeah, it's getting pricey, and as with all the word bearers, but victory points are so hard to come by in some missions that any legion with access to a means of getting additional victory points, and I can't remember what other legion has a unit that does the same thing, really can put a lot of missions out of reach for some of your opponents.
Yeah, I do like this unit. I really, really do. Probably the other things that come to mind that generate a similar effect again is like in Rites of War, like the Raven Guard, Decapitation Strike, or Alpha Legion being able to get bonus VPs for slaying the Warlord. Yeah, I don't know. I do like it. I really do like it. And I think there's some cool modeling that you could do with this unit in terms of really trophies and using different bodies for legendary equivalent. Yeah, I think it's nice.
Well, that rounds up the Word Bearers Legion review for us at Far East Wargaming. I hope you've enjoyed it, and look, if we have missed something or have we taken a wrong turn somewhere in our review, please let us know down in the comments. But if you have been listening for this entire time and you've enjoyed what we're doing, we'd appreciate if you could hit the like button down below. And also, if you're not already subscribed, which a lot of you aren't according to our analytics, hitting that subscribe button will get you notified of our latest releases, be those battle reports or Heresy Thursday podcasts there.
Yep, as always, it's a pleasure bringing you the content, interacting. Please keep the comments, the likes, and everything else. Subscribe. We really, really enjoy it. And as always, we will catch you on the next one.